Welcome, everybody, to the Jets Life Podcast. I am your host, Anthony. Today we have a lot to recap. We're going to go into a little bit of the trade deadline stuff. We already talked about this in depth on our Tuesday night show. So I'll try and keep that a little short here. And then we'll dive into, obviously, tomorrow's game against the Cleveland Browns, where the Jets will be hosting. First game of a new-look team where a lot of changes have happened, and we'll get right into those changes here to start the show. We'll start with the one of the smaller moves that happened last week. Carter being flipped to Philly for John Mechie III and a 6th-round pick. Jets also sent a 7th-round pick in the trade as well. So just a minor pick swap to bring in a receiver and clear up some cap room. That's the big move, the big deal with this Carter trade. You bring in a receiver to a room that's weak, let's say the least. Able to bring in a receiver and send off Carter and free up about $8 million in cap space for next season. That's the big deal. You basically are able to now start grooming the rest of this team with the additional cap room because they need a lot. And obviously, getting an additional $9 million in cap room helps in that area, as well as what happened in the other trades too. And again, we're doing a quick dive here, but if you have any questions, comments, definitely leave it in there. I'm happy to talk through anything that you guys might have a question on. The big blockbuster trade, obviously, being Sauce Gardner sent to the Colts for 2 first-round picks and Adonai Mitchell. Big trade here. The Jets were limited in draft capital for the next couple of years. Obviously, the Aaron Rodgers experiment, the Devontae Adams trade, there was a lot of different factors, Hassan Reddick, that really limited what the Jets had moving into the 2026 NFL draft. It was huge for them to leave this trade deadline with some additional ammunition. I didn't believe that they would be leaving this with the amount of ammunition that they've accumulated, but to say the least here, the Jets are able to get Sauce Gardner to a new situation in Indy, a winning situation, 7-2, best record I think he's ever had in his entire NFL career through 9 games of the season. So he goes to Indianapolis. Jets acquire 2 first-round picks. That'll probably be, at least for this year, a late first-round pick, probably picking somewhere between 26 and 32. I don't see Indy going all the way to the Super Bowl, but probably somewhere between 26 and 28 is the most realistic. But obviously, you have to set yourself up for the worst-case scenario. It could be the 32nd pick if they go on some sort of run in January and February. But the Jets are able to get some huge draft capital. Obviously, the 2027 draft pick is going to be something we all keep our eyes on. When the Jamal Adams trade happened back in 2021, whatever year it was, 2020, when that trade happened, the initial thoughts on that trade at the time was, okay, the Jets will be picking in the mid-20s for the next couple of years with this draft haul that they've gotten. Which was the case in the first year, and obviously that trade turned into a trade-up. We're able to get AVT as a result of that. But the second year, things kind of fell apart for Seattle, and I'm not saying that will be the case for Indy, but the NFL is crazy. One year, a team could look great. Next year, things can kind of disintegrate. And Indianapolis is a team that has Daniel Jones over there, who's had an outstanding season on a contract year with the Giants, then got paid, and obviously, that the rest of the story was there. Obviously, Indianapolis has a little bit more stability within the organization. Ballard being there for, I don't even know how long he was. I think he was there when they initially did the Sam Darnold trade, where the Jets sent them 3 second-round picks. So obviously, some key stability. The Jets have had 3 general managers. While Chris Ballard has still been there, and maybe even I'm not sure when he started, but anyway. And then the throw in of Adonai Mitchell, it's some people want to label this as 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick. Obviously, the way the NFL draft picks work is it's like a car at a dealership. It's loses its value as soon as that player crosses the podium. Is basically how it happens. So. It's a good throw-in. He's kind of fallen out of favor there after that little Malachi Corley situation where he fumbled the ball right at the goal line. something that still behooves me as far as why these players continue to just do that. But it is what it is. Fell out of favor with that coaching staff, obviously, and you know, Jets need receivers. They brought in Mechie already, and by virtue of just bringing in additional bodies with a little bit of upside, recent upside based on draft value, the Jets upgraded the wide receiver room. It's not saying much, obviously, because Alan Lazard was playing critical downs, with the Jets up until this trade. Now you have two guys that at least could strike a little bit of fear in the defense. Obviously, Adonai Mitchell can play on the outside. He could, run some crisp routes. Can get downfield. Can really stretch the field out for Garrett Wilson. Which, let's be real, a big factor in all this is you now take a little bit of pressure off of Garrett Wilson, and you're able to kind of keep moving this thing along. You're not kind of submitting yourself for the season based on this trade. You're bringing in some bodies. You're bringing in some offensive skill players. And at the end of the day, the Jets will probably be picking a quarterback in the 2026 NFL draft. If not, definitely 2027. You are building an offense slowly but surely with players that have some upside. And it's basically a 6-game audition or 9-game audition for John Mechie. And I think Adonai Mitchell's under contract for next year as well. So it's a situation where you could eventually be talking about 2027 having, Mitchell as a third receiver, a draft pick being your number 2 wide receiver, and obviously Garrett Wilson will finally be kicking into that extension he just signed in the summer, leading up into the 2027 season. So it's the right thing to do. Build around the quarterback, even though he's not here yet. Start putting the pieces around him, and hopefully by the time he's here, you're talking about an offense that has, some pieces around him instead of every single time that the Jets have drafted a quarterback, you're looking at the team and saying, okay, where the hell do we start? No offensive line, no skill players, lack of tight ends in the tight end room. And I'd say you look at this team and every area has a little bit of something you could start talking through. Obviously, wide receiver and Garrett Wilson, then you move over into the offensive line. You got 3 pieces of the 5 already solidified leading into 2026. You can always sign ABT to an extension. You could sign John Simpson to an extension. Hell, even Josh Myers has also earned the right to be on his roster moving forward. But there's pieces in place. This isn't a situation where a quarterback is going to come in and be asked to be the savior. The quarterback can come in and sort of develop at his own pace. And the hope and target is that you hit on the quarterback in 2027, where you have a bunch of draft capital now. You have a bunch of salary cap room. That would be the year that you really focus and say, okay, if we hit on the quarterback, 2027, we can put all the chips on the table and really start, moving this rebuild into that next direction. That's the hope and dream. Obviously, the Jets have sold us by the factor of these trades. They have sold us hope, which is something that this organization really didn't have before this trade. But the fact of the matter is, you have got to, 1, absolutely have got to hit on the quarterback, and 2, out of these 8 or so draft picks you have in the first 2 rounds over the next couple of years, there needs to, obviously you want to hit on all of them, but there's got to be 5 starters, including the quarterback, 5 starters with all these picks. That's just the sheer fact of it. And obviously you want to build out the depth. You've got to hit on a couple 3rd-round picks. You've got to hit on a couple 4th-round picks. 5th or 7th, it is what it is. It's a crapshoot. That's what the NFL. Even the first 4 rounds is a crapshoot. But the Jets aren't in a situation where they can swing and miss on, 50% of these picks. They've got to nail north of 50% of these picks, based on where their roster is right now. That's just the way it's got to go. I know I'd say I'd be quick. We're 10 minutes in, but I'll jump into the other big trade that happened on Tuesday, the Quinnen Williams trade, sending him to Dallas for 2026 2nd-round pick, a 2027 1st-round pick, and Mozzie Smith. First thing I'll outline is that 2027 1st-round pick Strangely enough, there's a contingency in there that it will be the better of the 2 draft picks between Dallas and Green Bay. Normally not a stipulation that you see in these kind of trades. Usually it's pretty cut and dry that a team says, okay, this pick is the pick for this team, or if anything, the team trading away the pick would put the contingency it's the worst of the two. This was kind of a little bit of a home run type of situation for Muji because, again, as I mentioned with Indy, obviously this pick is going to be somewhere in the mid-20s the first year, but then the second year, anything can happen. An injury can happen. Daniel Jones could regress. There's a number of things that can happen in year 2, where maybe that second first round pick that we got from Indy could be something a little bit better than we're kind of envisioning. You're now saying the same thing here with the Dallas 2027 first round pick for 2 different teams. Green Bay and Dallas, and chances are Green Bay is probably Dallas is probably going to be the better of the 2 picks because Green Bay, they have stability. They have Micah Parsons. They have a really good core over there. Jordan Love, obviously, there too. And I have enough trust in LaFleur that even without Jordan Love there, we saw we did it with Malik Willis for a few games last season. So there's a little bit of faith there that, even if some catastrophe happens in Green Bay, they'll probably be still, be better, the worst, depending on what you want. They'll probably be picking later in the draft than Dallas. So most likely that 2027 first round pick is a Dallas first round pick. But still, that contingency being there gives the Jets a little bit of a security blanket there that, should one of these teams succeed, probably looking at the other team being a little bit down. And worst case scenario, both are picking in the 20s. And, you'll have a top 10 pick. The Jets will probably be picking top 10 next year as well. And you'll have 2 picks in the 20s that you can easily use for defense, more skilled players on offense. I think 2026 would be the ideal to acquire as much on the offense. Maybe a smart thing to do would be taking that second first round pick on, a wide receiver or something of that nature, and using those 2 second round picks on defense. And then 2027 with 3 first round picks, maybe that year going a little more defensive heavy. Because if you do it that way, you're probably secured on the offense. And then you'll need to obviously kind of recuperate your defense. And the good thing about all this too is it's easier to build build a defense in free agency than it is to build an offense. You see it year in, year out. Wide receivers don't free up. Offensive linemen, if they do free up, that are worth getting a contract. If they free up, they're usually picked up right away by one of these juggernaut teams to help fortify an offensive line, or paid heavily by a lower tier team. Not many of the elite tight ends kind of find their way through. I'm trying to think of the last time you really saw an elite tight end kind of squeak his way through free agency. If you want to say the Hunter Henry year, there was a couple tight ends that came out that year. But nonetheless, you're usually go into free agency, you look at the defense side of the ball. It usually looks a little more promising than offense side because teams want to score points. They want their offense to be top level. So they're going to do whatever they can to keep their offensive players in house. And then usually it's at the risk of sending a couple defensive players out into free agency. And I think that's the area that the Jets can really attack is in free agency, go through the defensive players, bring in a couple people through the draft, obviously, because you do want some lower contract value players on your defense that with higher upside. And that's usually what the draft is a beautiful thing for. But yeah, the real goal in this whole thing, build that damn offense through the draft, build a defense through free agency, and supplement that with some draft capital. And it's crazy to say, but there is a vision here that if the Jets nail the quarterback and are able to kind of build around him the right way, there could be a way out of this fucking mess. And that's crazy to say here, but it's the truth. And the beautiful thing here, I was going into some of the salary cap stuff too here, and the beautiful thing about all this is, when you look at before the Williams trade and before the Sauce Gardner trade, the Jets have actually freed up approximately $120 million in cap room over the next 3 seasons. I wrote it down somewhere. Let me just take a look at my notes here again here. I think most of that 120 million is in 2028, maybe. Hold on, let me just look at my list here instead of talking to us. Sorry, so 103 million is actually what they freed up, and it goes 7 million. I'm sorry, 14 million next year, 53 million the following year, 29 million the following year, with 7 million or so freed up in this current season. And they'll probably use some of that to bring in other players, through injuries or whatever have you. And obviously some will be left over as well. But yeah, 14 million additional cap room in 2026, where it depends where you look too. Some of these websites say like over the cap says about $94 million available in 2026, whereas Spot Track has us about 117 million or so. So I'm not sure who to trust or what have you. I don't understand why they're so far apart in their analysis. If anybody knows, feel free to chime in there. But you would think that maybe these two websites would be, give or take 5 million off or something like that. The fact they're so far different is a little concerning. But I like the Spot Track number better than the over the cap number. But at the end of the day, they're just going to have a big money, and I don't think they're going to use it all in 2026. I think 2026 will be a year very similar to the 2025 free agency, where there's going to be a bunch of 1-year contracts out there. If they see a guy or two that they like for example, Cam Curl would be one that I would give some money to. The Jets have ignored the safety position for far too long. It's time to really kind of catch up to speed with what the NFL is today and build up the back end of that defense. Corners are great and all, and the Jets did focus on corners for a period of time, but the safety position was always one I felt like they undervalued for such a long period of time, and I think this is the situation where you have Malachi Moore. I would even say, if you're handling this free agency in a specific way, put some money into the safety position and then go in on day 2 and draft a safety as well. That would be my kind of intention, because you're gonna have so much money. That's the thing is, just bring in a few high quality players with filling out your roster in 2026. Put something competitive on the field, with something to build towards the future, and then hopefully, like I said, 2027 will be that year that we say full steam ahead. Let's get this thing rolling, and hope with what is hopefully a quarterback that understands what he's doing and can really get his team moving in the right direction. Okay, that's all I have on the free agency and the trade deadline stuff. I'll jump right into the Jets versus Browns game. If you're in the chat, or if you're in the video, just leave a chat here. Give me a score predictions. Give me any comments that you have on the game. Happy to kind of post those up there and discuss some of those things. But let's go right into the Jets versus Browns. Let's be real. Take the under in this game. This game is probably low scoring. Two offenses that have had their struggles this season. I understand the Jets put up a big scoring output against the Cincinnati Bengals, but that's basically happened every week. Doesn't matter who the Bengals are playing. They're getting their, every team's best offensive output. It seems like it's coming against Cincinnati Bengals if you play them. So you take a step in the other direction, and the Browns have a pretty solid defense. Although the Browns have fared a little bit worse on the road. I feel like they're one of those teams that have weird splits. At home, they're damn near impossible to score upon, and on the road, it's not as cut and dry as it might be. They've allowed 30 points a couple of times, including last week in New England. So maybe it's a situation where the Jets have another opportunity here, but my biggest concern is which Justin Fields do you get? Do you get the Justin Fields that played against the Cincinnati Bengals? Again, terrible defense. Understand that's the case. And obviously he had a good game against Pittsburgh, do you get that Justin Fields? Or do you get a little bit more of the norm that we've seen at Justin Fields? The one against Buffalo, the one against Denver, the one against Carolina, the one that got benched against Carolina. I think that's the biggest factor for the rest of the season, really, for the Jets, is you're going to get games from Justin Fields like the Pittsburgh game, and it's like, okay, where has this been all season? And you're going to get yourself excited, and rightfully so. And we want to see this offense score points. I know that there's a tank out there that wants a tank, and I understand that 100%. I want the Jets to get the best possible pick too. But at the end of the day, I mean, the Jets are going to weasel out a couple wins. They're going to lose games. You're like, what the hell's wrong with this team? And the end result, they're going to be around two or three wins. It's just the way it's going to go. Just ideally, you lose games that, against teams that are also vying for that top pick. Like that New Orleans game. I'm not saying I'm rooting for a loss, but if there's a good game to lose, that's a good game to lose. Because you're helping yourself out in two different ways. You're helping by knocking the Saints down a peg in the draft order, and obviously you're helping by continuing to lose and getting yourself closer and closer to that top overall pick. But yeah, which Justin Fields is going to show up here? And more cases than not, especially against a good defense, you're kind of expecting the Denver, Carolina version of Justin Fields to be here. Is he going to hold on to the ball for too long? That cannot be the case here. Myles Garrett, obviously, after last week's game, having 5 sacks on Drake May and that New England offensive line, I do think the Jets have a little bit of an advantage as far as the offensive line is concerned over New England. Obviously, investing heavily in the draft over the last few years in that offensive line and in free agency has a lot to do with that. But I don't know if this is a situation where, the Jets are going to be allowing, and then they did it early in the season too against Pittsburgh. T.J. Watt was pretty much held in check. He did have one possession or so that I think he limited us from scoring a touchdown and held us to a field goal, and obviously that being a critical possession. Where he had 2 tackles for a loss, and I forget what point of the game it was. I think it was at the end of the first half somewhere. Critical stretch of a couple plays. Those are the kind of things you cannot allow Myles Garrett to do. You've got to keep him in check, and keeping in check sometimes for a player of his stature might be allowing him to get 1 or 2 sacks in this game, and just don't allow anybody else on the defense to beat you. If it's just him, sometimes you got to deal with that. Sometimes good players are going to do good things, and then it's the NFL. But I'll go right into our key matchups here, and I'll start with that one actually. I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, my little target here. Let's start with just some of the key matchups in this game and start right off the bat with the Jets' run defense, which has been atrocious this season. That Cincinnati Bengals game, it really kind of emphasized the weakness that the Jets have in the middle of the field. I wouldn't necessarily say on the defensive line, because they have some good players there in Phillips and Juwan Briggs. I think it's more that second and third level. The tackling of the safeties and the tackling of these linebackers has not been ideal. Jamie and Sherwood, after signing that big contract, is regressing, and obviously the Jets are in a situation where there's got to be some buyer's remorse for that contract. I'd look at him as a possible player that the Jets might even consider trying to either trade. You can't cut him because there's a lot of dead cap associated with that. Maybe there's some post-June 1 stuff that you can do to move some money around, but at the end of the day, you're still acquiring a lot of dead cap, and with all those draft capital and salary cap room that we acquired, the last thing you want to start doing is just getting rid of players and paying them to not be here. The benching Quincy Williams is a little weird. Yeah, he might be having a down year to his standards, but there's other players in his defense that are doing just as bad, if not worse, than him. And yeah, I know Glenn said he wished that conversation was held in-house, but again, there's other players in this defense that should be benched. But the key to this Browns game, really, it comes down to that offense, these two offenses. And if you ask me right now, who do I trust to be able to score some points more than the other? To me, it is the Jets, as weird as that might sound. just because they're able to run the football. If the Jets play their game and they're able to control the clock and run the football effectively, like they did against Cincinnati, again, I understand the level of competition on that Cincinnati defense is not near what the Browns can offer, but the Browns also, don't have the best run defense. But in this game, it really comes down to basically weakness versus weakness on this a little bit. The Browns' running attack is not as strong as the Jets' running attack is on offense. But if you get Judkins going, we saw what he did against a few weeks ago. I want to say it was against Miami. If he can get the ball, he can beat you by himself, and then that opens things up in a passing game where not overly concerned about Dylan Gabriel, but give him some time. He can deliver accurate passes. That's that was the big thing for him in college. I just don't think he's prepared at this point in time to be an NFL quarterback, but he was kind of thrust into that role because of the poor performances of Flacco earlier in the year. But yeah, at the end of the day, this run defense the Jets have, it's got to move in the right direction, and it's a little difficult when you consider that their best run defender in Quentin Williams was traded this week. So a lot of things to acclimate yourself to, a lot of things to get under control, and you would kind of expect that this defense probably takes a step back, but how much further can it really go? They're ranked 26th. There's a few spots below them. Can they stick around there? That's not going to be helpful in this game because you need to stop the run. But can the Browns' running attack can also kind of stay stagnant to what they've generally been for most of the season? You just want to keep that running game in check, and I think if you do, you can escape this game with a victory. The next big matchup, and I don't know what the weather's looking like in Cleveland. It's usually always shitty later in the year from like a wind perspective, and if you get that like lake winds and stuff like that, it can be a little messy. Actually, sorry, their Jets are at home, and I do know that the weather is going to be a little. So you may not see a big game in a passing attack, but obviously it's the NFL. You got to throw the ball every once in a while, even in bad weather. But Garrett Wilson versus Denzel Ward. Denzel Ward typically does travel with the number one wide receiver, so I'd anticipate that he'd be following Garrett Wilson around. And in a normal situation, week to week, you would say, okay, that sucks because Jets literally have nobody else. But there's a couple players here with some upside, and I don't know how prepared they're going to be for this game. Having just been traded on Tuesday, the Jets would have to really simplify their game plan for these guys to be ready, for whatever's coming this week. And obviously, Justin Fields got to be deliver the pass. But you have other options now that at least can run a route tree to some precision and can strike a little fear with running the ball down the field. I mean, let's be real. Adonai Mitchell was a player that a lot of draft experts were talking about being a mid-20s first round pick in 2023. He just hasn't lived up to that first round potential or even that second round potential. Hence why he was a throw-in in a Sauce Gardner trade. But there's some upside there, more upside than Lazard. And, that's saying a lot here for this Jets team that was just absolutely weak at the wide receiver position. So that'll be an interesting matchup. Two former Ohio State Buckeyes going head-to-head on Sunday. Hopefully Garrett Wilson's fully and clear, ready to play. I don't know if I know he has been practicing. I don't know if they've given a prognosis for the game on the injury report. Hoping he plays because, even though this offense scored a bunch of points last week, they could have scored a bunch more. You would assume if Garrett Wilson was on the field. He makes the team better, let's be real. Next big, and again, we went from weakness to weakness, Jets run defense versus the Browns running attack. Now you get into a strength versus strength where the Jets are ranked third in rushing yards per game versus the Browns defense, which is ranked ninth in running yards per game. I mentioned it earlier. For the Jets to win this game, it's got to be on the ground. They've got to be able to run the football. This offensive line's got to impose their will, very similar to what they did against Cincinnati. And it's a big test. It's a big test for this offensive line, not just in the run game, but overall, even on passing downs. And I'll talk about it in a moment here, but the Jets have got to be able to run the football. They've got to be able to score some points. It's going to be a messy game. This is a game that really could end, with a score of 9-6, 10-7. It's something that's that that small, and it could even be a game that flips on the defensive turnover. Anything could really happen in this game. It's such a crapshoot. But I do have a little bit more faith in the Jets being able to run the football. You just need to see building blocks. You need to see his team moving forward in the right direction. Can they road grade in this game? Can they push this Cleveland Browns defense a little bit more than in the past against other teams with stronger running? That's where I think this offense needs to take a step forward, because the rest of the season really, I think, is a judgment of the offensive line. We're talking about all this stuff here about this offensive line being what we want it to be. Mafia Sports Report. Guys, if you're listening here, whatever, you got to join the Mafia Sports Report after this is over. We're tuning in at 12 o'clock. Tommy does an outstanding job getting us all together, and it's an entertaining show. We get on there and talk about 2 hours. Sometimes it goes a little longer than that, 2.5 hours. It's a lot of fun. Tommy does an outstanding job. But yeah, if you're going to join up, sign up to his channel too. And yeah, feel free to join the fun. But yeah, this Jets running offense is going to be the big factor in this game. Can they run the ball on this Cleveland Browns defense? If they do, you're talking about a game that could be in the Jets' hands. I don't trust the Browns offense, but we've also seen them go up against poor defenses like the Miami Dolphins, and I want to say they put up 30 points in that game. And it was a lot of it was the Tua turnovers, which, as bad as Justin Fields has been this season, I'll give him one thing: he has not turned the football over through the air that much. He's had a few fumbles, obviously, but not a lot of turnovers on the ground. In the air. So there's that's been working in his favor a little bit. Let's continue here, because as I mentioned, I do have that show with Tommy here in the next 28 minutes. So we'll get that going in here in a few moments. Got ahead of myself. Let's start talking about the X factors in this game. I'll start with the offense side of the ball, and I just popped it up. So if you have a quick eye, you probably saw it already. Before I get there, I gotta say I'm very disappointed the Jets not giving us Wilson for a 6th-round pick. That's more than fair. Tommy coming in with the jokes. Now Garrett Wilson is here to stay. He's an untouchable. The Bills did actually. There's been reports that the Bills and Patriots did call the Jets. I'm not sure for who exactly. Heard Breece Hall's name out there, but the Bills getting Breece Hall doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe it was for, if I had to guess, Bills maybe calling for Quincy Williams. Needs some help with the linebacker position. Could have been the target. And the Jets hung up the phone more or less. I mean, obviously they answered the phone, but their stance is not really trading within the division, which I appreciate. Now, if the Bills would have came in with a 1st-round pick or something like that for a player with a lower round grade, obviously, don't be stupid and put your ego to the side and take what's better for the team. But yeah, I don't see the Jets trading a premium player like Breece Hall to a division rival. I think the Patriots maybe could have called about Hall, getting some additional help in the run game and in the pass game out of the running back position. Could have been a target there. But yeah, hang up that call. The Bills don't need more players, at least not from us. Last thing I want is a player leaving us and going win a championship or a division title with the Patriots and our Bills. Anyway, offensive X factor, Olu Fashion, he's going to have his work cut out for him this game. We saw what Myles Garrett did against Will Campbell of the Patriots last week. He feasted on a young offensive tackle. He does that against a lot of key players, but again, the rest of this game is an evaluation on the offensive line and how do you fare against the best defensive end that we've seen playing in the league over the last, since he's been in the league, like 7 years. I think it's been 8 years. How does Olu do in a situation against a top-notch defensive lineman? I'm very intrigued in seeing this. Is he going to get beat up a little bit? I'd love to see him put up a fight, but you got to be real. This guy's got to, the offensive line is the major factor we're looking at here for the rest of the way. Can Olu put some good film on the side and put a little check mark in his belt. He went up toe to toe with Myles Garrett and was able to keep him in check. Can he do something like that? Obviously, he's going to need help. It's not going to be one-on-one all game. But you are going to be put in situations where you're one-on-one with Myles Garrett. And can you win those battles? On the defense side of the ball, again, I mentioned it earlier, the Jets have to win this game have got to win in the run. And maybe it's a situation where a lot of people are targeting this game as a revenge game for guys like Corley or, whatever. But I'm going with a revenge game from Ja'Wan Briggs. Former Cleveland Brown was traded over to the Jets in the offseason for a pick swap, a sixth round, seventh round pick swap. I'm going with Ja'Wan Briggs to come into this game, put some fight into this team. Something funny that happens, and we talk about it all the time, like when a team makes a change at the coach, it's usually gives a little bit of a ring into the locker room, gives them a little spice for a game or two. Something could be said about making a trade or multiple trades in a position group. Like, and depending on what the message is inside the locker room, I'm very intrigued on what the message was. And obviously, it doesn't take too much to understand the message. Jets were given premium draft capital for two great players, and one of which requested a trade, and they facilitated that. The other didn't request a trade, just got a big contract in the summer, and the Jets acted on what was the Godfather offer of 2 first-round picks. But what does happen in a position group sometimes is when a key man in that position is traded away or is cut or whatever have you, sometimes it sends something into that room where all those guys, okay, now we have an opportunity. We have to step up. If we step up, we have a potential future to build upon with this team. And sometimes you see it where, oh crap, we just traded away our best run defender, and all of a sudden the run defense has a big step in the right direction in the following season. Following week or week or two. Long term, obviously, these trades are going to have an impact on this team that's probably more in the negative. And when I say long term, I'm just talking for the rest of the season. You're going to feel these trades, over the course of these last 9 games. But then you could have a situation where it's a one-game thing where it's like, holy crap, where the hell does this run defense come from? They're stopping everything. They're feeding their way through. Over the course of time, when you lose a guy like Quinton Williams who played a high share of the snaps on the defense, you're gonna see some regression in the room, rightfully so. That's why a team acquired him for a first-round pick. But yeah, I have Ja'Wan Briggs as my potential X factor in this game. All we have left here, and I'm got a little lazy, I guess. Didn't put it in here, so I'll add it to the banner. Score predictions for this game. I mentioned earlier, this game, it could be very, very low scoring. And I think it will be low scoring, especially with the weather. But I'm going to say that the Jets come out. I'm going to say the Jets come out. The offense is going to struggle. I'll put it out there. I think the offense will struggle, but I think this running game will do enough at some point in this game to get them into field goal range a couple of times. Maybe this defense makes a big play. Maybe they get the first interception of the season. Wouldn't that be outstanding if it was Azaria Thomas getting his first interception of the season, filling in for Sauce Gardner? But I think this is the game where the Jets could potentially get that second win of the season. I'm going to say the Jets are going to win this game by a score of 13-7. Say 13-9. 13-7. I don't see Cleveland getting much offensive push in this game to get into field goal range 3 times, unless there's defensive turnovers. I'm going to go with that. 13-7. I think they find their way to 1 touchdown somehow, some way. And the Jets, with that run game, able to get into field goal range a couple of times and maybe at one point in the game punch it in for the victory. But that's what I got. The Jets winning this game by a score of 13-7. Low scoring, bad weather game with two good defenses. And let's see what happens. If you haven't already, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and most importantly, let's go Jets.